Hello everyone, welcome to episode 4 of the RT show with me, Si, Jez, Rich, and our guest returning from season 1, catching up. He is the co-founder of PRS Recruitment, Recruit and Refer, and It's All About Me, and also the chairman of the international branch of the Letdown Society. He is, of course, Randhir. The last one, of course, was a joke. It was a joke, Randhir. I am only jesting with you.
I am proud to hold that title. You can joke about it all you want, but it's still there.
How are things?
Things are, I guess, I'd like to say things are good. They're as good as they can be, but I think the positive thing I say, I don't really have a lot to complain about. I have a lot to moan and whine about, but I don't have a lot of major problems to complain about per se. But things are okay. What about you guys?
Yeah, not bad. Obviously, you're on the other side of the world, aren't you? Over in Canada, which is what we're going to chat to you about today. How things are going over there with COVID. And I know over here we were chatting just before that they've announced today, because of course we're recording this on Monday the 23rd of November, and it was announced today that we will definitely be coming out of the current lockdown no matter what. Next week we'll be reverting back to the 3-tiered system of localized lockdowns, which is good news in many ways, particularly if you're in tier 1 or 2, because most things are going to be open. So there's a semblance of normality returning, which I think is good for people, particularly this time of year. The dark nights, colder days are coming up towards Christmas as well. It's that time of year where people want to be with family and friends, celebrating and catching up. It's not going to be quite the same as it would be, usually, but at least in most places, hopefully you can catch up in some form with some family and friends, rather than the lockdown as it currently is being extended. So I think, for me personally, that's a hint of good news. Rich, how about you?
Oh, I'm just living life, man. Just just riding it out. As Raj said, I'm still working. We can't really complain about too much. Just gearing up for my daughter's birthday next week, and just seeing how it goes. That's it.
Take it as it comes. Jez, what about you?
Yeah, pretty much the same, really. Just keeping my eyes now and again on what changes are going on through the government, and trying to not look at the news too much with what's happening, but just taking in little bits and pieces of information here as it comes. And yeah, family's doing okay, really. I think we're just settling in, looking at, obviously when Christmas comes, we're starting to see people putting out their Christmas decorations earlier as well. I think they just want to kind of get into that season now and start, meeting families hopefully over the next couple of weeks once this lockdown has ended. It's going to be interesting on Thursday what they look to change, really. But yeah, I think it's just a case of playing it by ear over the next few weeks, I think. And yeah, working similar, really, just working in the office, kind of COVID safe, shall I say. So we're having to wear masks as such, walking around. But yeah, it's very limited presence in the offices. So we're just trying, it allows us to get on with our work, which is good, which is really good as well.
Good stuff. So we'll head right into the questions. Randhir, you're in the hot seat.
Okay, so cool. I'll do my best.
We spoke quite a few months ago. It was close to the beginning, I think, of the global COVID crisis and lockdowns and whatnot. Has anything changed over on your side of the world in the way COVID has been managed since we last spoke?
Yeah, I guess so, per se. I mean, in a short answer, I'd say COVID has very much been unmanaged than managed in a lot of way. It's I think we talked a little bit before we started here, almost off air, about the slightly cultural difference of how things are done here, versus that. For example, there is no way to sort of enforce a fine or anything like that, the way the laws and everything is set up. So it's very hard to enforce anything. So when it does come to things like, you know, we are currently on a lockdown, but as you can see, I'm at work and I've got a colleague with me at work, you know, and it's kind of like one of them things where you're told one thing, but they can't make you do it because there's no consequence if you don't listen. So like I said, in regards to COVID, we always call it, there is no enforcing, and it's being unmanaged rather than managing. I think when we first spoke, it was about what, 50 odd cases, and we're up at 25,000 now. And I do remember at the start of that, the sort of one of the heads here of the government, the head doctor, her name is Bonnie Henry, and they put a mural of her when she first started because she was looking after it very well. And now we hear that she's getting hate mail and death threats and stuff like that because things have kind of gone a lot worse. We feel that we weren't getting the right kind of information. When they were reporting, let's say they were reporting, oh, we have 50 cases. Apparently they weren't reporting it correctly. And then later down the line, the real numbers started coming out. So it was a lot worse than maybe they were saying. So a lot of people were kind of just going about their daily basis thinking it's not a big problem, and it started to become a bit of a problem. But, you know, like, I mean, 25,000 cases is quite high, but a lot of them have been recent. I would say, you know, in the last month, we've doubled from about 5 to 10,000 to 25,000, whether that's because cases are shooting up or because they're actually reporting the right numbers, we don't know. But there has only been around 331 deaths. And just this weekend, we had the worst day, which was 11 deaths in one day. And that's the worst day we've had since the whole of this thing. So, you know, I'm not saying it's acceptable or good, but like, it is definitely not on a par with some of the other places in the world, and even some of the other places in Canada. Like the East Coast is a lot worse than it is over here on the West Coast. So they're not as bad as they were, as is the rest, I should say, but there's still needs some managing, you know. But you know, in regards to the difference, yeah, you know, people were clapping every day at 7 o'clock. If you just looked out your window, and they've stopped doing that now. You know, it's just people are a little bit more fed up with it. So yeah.
What were they clapping for, out of interest? Because
I should explain. They were clapping for the nurses and so on. Yeah. So I don't know. I guess I find it strange that they were clapping every day at 7 when there was only 50 cases. Now there's 225,000 cases, and they're not clapping. Surely the nurses are a lot more at work now than they were. I know. I read reports that hospitals are overcrowded. So, but no one's clapping or anything then. So I guess the point I'm trying to say is the mood isn't as positive as it was, let's say, when we started, where everyone was like, come on, we're in it together. Everyone's positive. I think there's definitely a divide, which is, you know, people saying, can we just go back to normal and whatever happens. And then there's people saying that's very irresponsible and we have to lock down and we have to protect everyone. So I think there's starting to become a bit of a divide on the way things should be done. And as I mentioned before, because there isn't no real enforcement, I feel people are just, you know, doing what they want a little bit more.
It's interesting what you say about the positive mood, because I think there's probably some similarities here as well. When, you know, the clap for carers was going on, things, yes, we were in a lockdown, but people were trying to keep spirits up, being positive. But then it's like some people just get dragged down in it and things change, and then it's just become the norm because it's been going on for so long. So some of the positive things are kind of have waned in many ways, or the acts of trying to keep people's spirits up have waned, because it's just like, oh, this is just going on and on.
Yeah. Do you know what's interesting? It's probably worth mentioning as well for you guys who wouldn't be aware. We had our local election here as well. So like, I know obviously there was a lot of big deal about the US election. I'm sure it's in the news in the UK, but it's huge over here in Canada because it makes a big difference on the way everything is done, the way that things are going on in the US. But people were overlooking that we had a local election here as well. And I think the first half of it, with, like I said, them hiding all these numbers and promising all these great things that are going to happen, they've kind of disappeared a little bit now that the election is over and the party that's in power has sort of won again, and they're still in power, and they've kind of disappeared a little bit on everyone. Like there was these crazy promises of like, oh, everyone's going to get $1,000, $2,000 as a Christmas gift because you have to stay indoors. And then as soon as they were in power, it was like, well, we have to get the government to approve that, and we'll let you know if that happens, you know. And there was all these promises of how they're going to sort this, and it's just kind of dwindled out a little bit. It's quite, I think, like I said, we're speaking to a lot of people here who are talking about how that's why they were hiding certain things from the public. It's because they wanted it to look like, yeah, we've got it all under knocks, all under control, and everything's great. Re-elect us, and I think then as soon as that's over, suddenly the truth's starting to spray out a little bit more. You know, so it's, I think that's why maybe some of the mood locally here has just gone a bit more glum than it was maybe a few months ago as well.
Politics always turns people's mood glum, I have to say.
For sure.
So as a businessman then, and maybe specific to your business, what's the biggest challenge that you've seen, and how are you managing to overcome those challenges at the moment?
I think the biggest challenge is not knowing what's going to come next. I think obviously in the recruitment world, we're finding people jobs and we don't even know if offices are open, you know? So it's kind of like it's not a kind of job where you do the same thing every day. You know, Monday could be interviewing people for a job, you know, Wednesday could be looking for people for a job, and then Friday could be like, you know, doing an offer and acceptance of moving a job and helping them start. Now, every office is different because some places are open, some places are closed. Some people are working from home, some people are not. To try and get someone to move into a job when they don't know if that, you know, you're basically saying to someone, hey, how about you move to this company over here? You're not going to meet any of your work colleagues for the next 6 months, and you're going to be working from home and just phoning in, but, you know, don't worry, you'll get along with them. It's quite a challenge, you know. The uncertainty of which company is going to go down or which company isn't going to survive is very difficult to make people move. A lot of people want to leave their current companies because they're seeing layoffs and stuff. So they're kind of like, let's see what's out there. I think it's a real challenge to just explain what it's like to work for this next company when we don't really know what's going on there. At the moment, you know, it's quite a challenge from an industry perspective. And I think just in general for businesses, like you said, it's difficult because, you know, the economy is slowing down, which is expectable, but your costs are not slowing down, you know? So like, you can't just like, you know, I know I'm sat here in my office today, we can't just break the lease, you know, there's big consequences for that. But then, you know, at the same time, there's no help really, you know, there's no help to kind of say, oh, well, you know, you've got to sort of get through it. So I feel the biggest challenge is a lot of businesses to survive are probably expected to, you know, empty your savings rather than, you know, go ahead and keep moving forward. So it's just, you know, you can't, to keep my team here motivated and just tell them what's going on. It's quite difficult because, you know, when you don't know what's going on, how do you tell everyone, don't worry, it's going to be fine, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, and you don't really know, you know, you're kind of going by what you think's going to happen, and you've got to just run with it a little bit. And to, you know, I'm always pushing my team and saying, make sure you're organized, but then how are you supposed to be organized? You don't know what's coming, we don't know what's coming, you've got to just kind of run with it a little bit. So yeah, it's quite a challenge from that side for sure. And then just but the main thing I'd say is just the costs are not going down, but the revenue is slowing down. So it's just tough to know if you're still going to be able to keep going.
So still uncertainty around the way your business is going to operate it through these times. Are there any additional resources then that you've had to use or help you along because things have changed for you? So have you had to use different things or do things in a massively different way in terms of the business?
Yeah, for sure. You know, this is probably, I think up until this point, I've been a bit complaining. This is actually one place where I'd say Canada in general has done really, really well. I mean, as always, we can always do better with resources, but I think they've done really well here. You know, we've got the first program we've used is a program called CEBA. It stands for something else, but obviously CEBA, I can't remember what the full name is, but we'll go with CEBA. And it's a $40,000 interest-free sort of credit limit, which is with the government. It was really easy to apply for because you could just apply for it online through your bank and it was just dropped into your bank account within 5 days. I think they're extending it from 40,000 to 60,000. And as long as you pay back 75% of it within the next 2 years, that remaining 25% is written off. So I think, Yeah, so it's 40,000. So I believe if we pay back 30,000 in the next 2 years, the 10,000 is just written off. So you kind of get a bit of relief, but a bit of interest to keep going. There is a worry that they just keep on extending it, and you kind of get yourself into a big load of debt, but it keeps you going, let's say. But it depends on your business. Obviously, they've done that flat fee of 40,000 now. For some people, their costs might be 4 or 5. That keeps them going for 6 to 9 months. But like, for others that, if your costs are 20,000 a month, it doesn't really help a lot. It just kind of gets you through a little bit. They have done some relief on business rent. I believe it was like, I can't remember what the percentage is, but they gave, let's call it, 30 or 40% of business rent. But it was a bit strange. You had to ask your landlord to fill in a bunch of forms, and the landlord sort of went for it, and then you got it reduced. So they've changed it because everyone was complaining, saying half their landlords, some of them are not in the country, and some of them just won't fill in forms for you because they got other things to do, and they're bothered about their rent coming in. So they've changed it so you can actually control it yourself. But and they've added everything in there. So like, they've added relief. It was only released this week, so I don't know the ins and outs, but I know it includes, let's say, business insurance. It includes some of your general business costs, your leasing, everything that's involved. There's a portion on there. So that's been added this week. I think the biggest one that's helped us is the wage subsidiary. You can claim up to, depending on how much you're earning at the moment, you can claim up to around 70% of all your staff's wages. And those are, it's like a month by month one. So if you have a month where you don't really have a lot of income, you can claim 70% of the wage salaries. But then if you have a month that you have a lot of good income, you can't claim that month. So it's like it averages it out a little bit. So it's not like all these massive corporations have suddenly taken a 70% wage hike and they're just doing loads and loads. It's just depends on your income. That's a pretty good one. And I think the CRA, which is like our inland revenue, our taxes here, they've abolished all late fees. So if you're late paying your tax and you're late filing your tax, they're not going to charge interest and late payments. They've just put all them on hold, which is quite helpful, because I'm sure the last thing anyone wants to do now is pay tax bills and stuff when they're trying to survive and so on. So that's a pretty good one. I think there's a bunch of like independent programs out there of, you can apply for grants and stuff like that, but those are the main government ones from a business perspective. But they are working on it every week. There's always new announcements coming out all the time. And they just sort of set up the website where you just look and see what the latest one is. They do have different benefits for different industries. I know for the agriculture side, there's different ones. But for a general business like us, this is where, we've been helped a little bit. Naturally, it's probably the same with you guys. The biggest industries are the hospitality, like the bars and restaurants. They hit the worst because it's just, they're under so much restrictions and they don't know if they can stay open or not. And then generally people are a bit worried about coming in and out. So it's they're the ones that have been hit really, really hard. And it is sad to sort of like have a little drive or wander downtown and see how many places are boarded up and that they're not going to reopen, and how many of your favorite places are not, you can't eat at or go for a drink at anymore. But I don't know if there's specific ones to bars and restaurants, but I know that some of these benefits I mentioned, it's just not enough for a lot of them to keep going. They can't cut their overheads, so it's just near impossible for a lot of them. Vancouver in particular is definitely a city that, the cost of sort of rent and things like that, and the property costs are very, very high, in comparison to how much traffic there is and how much they earn. The margins are already tight, so they're really in a bad spot, a lot of them.
And going alongside that, with the support that businesses get, is there any support for, like, personal support for the employees who might not be able to go into work?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they had a benefit for I think it was called CERB, where you it was around $2,000 a month for 6 months, where it was just some income support, I guess, if you were laid off or if you're in a position where you're no longer making income. And that wasn't just for individuals, that was for an individual who could own a business as well. So like, let's say, for example, like a nail salon or something, you still could claim the income because no one's coming into your salon, or you're shutting down your salon due to COVID. You could claim that, but that only lasted for about, I think it was anywhere between 4 to 6 months, and that's been ended now. And they've just gone on to employment insurance, which is around, I think it's around $900 every 2 weeks. In a city where rent is on average $2,500 a month, it's not enough. It's kind of like, it's obviously helpful, but it's just it's a temporary quick fix. Still, a lot of people are saying it's just not enough to get through. So, generally people are struggling, from that side. I do believe they've got some personal rent relief as well, but as long as your income last year was below a certain amount. So I believe, I don't know the exact amount, but I believe it's around, if your household income was less than $75,000, I believe you can have some rental and mortgage relief. But if you're above that, you don't get that from the BC Housing Association. It's not something I guess I've looked into, so I'm not too sure what it is, but there's something there. And I believe it's like 25% of rent relief or something like that. But I'd say there's more for businesses there is on the personal side of things. There's nothing else coming up. It is very much empty your savings time, I would say, for a lot of people.
Wow. Yeah.
I think there's similar in some ways here on the personal side, because obviously there's the 80% furlough, which is the main one that goes into the businesses. A lot of businesses are choosing to top up the 20%, so their employees do get their regular wage. But it's the self-employed that have been hit. There's not really been anything meaningful in place for them. There's nothing that's on a par with the furlough scheme. And I know a lot of self-employed people, freelancers and whatnot, they're really struggling, particularly because of the industries that have been shut down. The arts, the building trade initially. They're really suffering. So it's difficult because obviously different economies and different sides of the world have a bigger focus on different industries. So I don't know, perhaps over here, if something like you said over in Canada, if it was more industry specific rather than a blanket, this is what we're offering, if that would work better. I don't know, Jez, Rich, anything you want to interject with there?
Just on my part, I think from what you mentioned, Raj, I think it seems like there is a level of management that the government have kind of put in place for businesses to kind of keep afloat. I know it's probably easier saying that because there is a period of time where, as you said, the government can't keep giving. Yeah. And during these times, and they're going to have to kind of put a stopgap to say, okay, if we're going to continue to do that, we might have to increase tax on certain things later on in life. But I do think it's a case of, you said, based on the UK, we've got it with the regards to like the furlough scheme and how that's working. I think there's an element of how long can people be on that, because they can't survive forever on payments that they're having to, on bills they're having to pay, and rental payments if they're renting a home, or mortgages, things like that, cars. It's just a massive.
It is tough for sure. Do you know? I think. I do believe they're trying to see who is going to survive and who isn't. And I almost feel like once you get past that point where lots of businesses do go under, then there's going to be another relief program, because I think they're trying to hoard on to bits of the cash for a while. I've heard there's interesting conspiracy theories going out here that apparently there's some vaccines going around of some point now, and they're meant to be towards right at the end of it and getting ready for distribution. But there's a lot of theories going around that Canada does have a bunch of vaccines right now, and they're hoarding them and they're building them up because they plan to sell them to other countries to get all this tax back. So I don't know, someone was just saying for the amount of for the amount of vaccines they've ordered is way more than the population of, let's say, Canada. So it doesn't make sense unless they're planning on selling them to other countries to make a ton of money out of it to cover all the losses, which doesn't seem very humane, but it does seem a way that almost Canada decides how to survive. So it's an interesting one. I think one thing I did miss out before when I was talking about the unenforcement of lockdowns and some of the restaurants staying open and not. What's interesting is nearly all the gyms have been ordered closed. Yeah, they're really strict on gyms like cycle centers and things like that. They've all been strictly locked down. A lot of people are really upset that the one escape you had at the moment was being able to go to the gym and stuff and just kind of, working it off. And nearly all of that had been shut down just in the last couple of weeks. So a lot of people are quite unhappy. If you're not aware, the culture out here in Vancouver is very gym happy. That you'd say 60-70% of the population all belong to a gym and work out, or at least go for walks and hikes and stuff. So it's very, very popular. So they've shut it down, which is pretty, it's just causing quite a bit of a more of a glum attitude again.
I think over here, when they closed the gyms again a couple of weeks ago, that caused a bit of a furor with people. And I get it because, like you said, it's people's mental health is helped by physical exercise, your physical health. And we know the healthier you are, the less likely you are to become ill. So it's kind of, balancing, people can go to the gym, exercise, which will help with their physical and mental health, but also, you're sweating, you're breathing heavier. There's that risk of potentially passing something on if you are asymptomatic and carrying COVID. But it just seems to make sense to have them open for those that have got, strict measures in place, and then, it should have a positive impact. Rich, anything you want to add?
I'm just gonna really just talk about the management of it in terms of the businesses, because I think the worst affected are the independent businesses, the local shops that haven't got that online trade established. You've got the big companies, I'm not going to mention any names, that have that online shops, but it just feels like even when you go out into the city centre, shops are still open. Like the big main shops are still open because they've got the click and collect services. But then when you go into the Leeds market, some of the stores are shut, and it just feels like, why is it some businesses are open, like in terms of some businesses are open and some businesses are closed. Like it seems like, it feels like this is a way, I don't know if it's by design or whatever, but it just feels like the local businesses are not getting the support they need, the adequate support that they need to survive this. And it's very disheartening, because you have to think about like the pensioner that goes to the local shops to get their local groceries and stuff and can't make that journey into the city centre to go to the big Tesco's or to the Sainsbury's. And it's just really disheartening that it just feels like the support's there, the support for certain things to go on is there, but on the other hand, it just feels like the support for like the smaller businesses is not there at all. And it's watching people's lives and the community's just getting shattered, and it's just kind of disheartening. And I do try and support the local businesses, but at the end of the day, there's only so much we can do as you could do as a person. So yeah.
And they're the ones, like you said, Rich, they're the ones that need the support the most.
Yeah.
They don't have the facilities to offer a click and collect service, or to quickly put that service in place like that, the big boys have. They've adapted, but supermarkets in particular, because they've obviously been able to remain open throughout, rightly so, because people need to eat and get their essentials. So Randhir, what do you think that government should do to support people who own small businesses, you know, the self-employed, because obviously you've built your business over the last few years, but you've been, you know, in that boat. You were self-employed. What should governments do to support self-employed businesses who can't operate due to any imposed lockdown measures?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think just to the point what Rich was saying there as well. I mean, there is a bit of a, I don't know if they're picking and choosing per se, but there is definitely a bit of a survive or die attitude towards a lot of businesses. You know, like if you can get through it, good for you. If you can't, you know, sorry, there's nothing we can do about it. So for the smaller ones, like you were saying, it is harder for sure. I mean, there's a lot of different things that I've come up with for sure, but it doesn't always apply to every single business. You know, it applies to, you know, maybe certain industries and certain other industries that can get around it. I think if we were trying to generalize on a few of them, you know, like I was talking about before, the costs are not going anywhere, but the revenues aren't coming in as much. So the first one would be to defer some sort of costs. So, you know, for example, there's nothing stopping them sort of saying, listen, this is how much tax you owe this year, but, you know, you can spread it out along the next 3 years because things should be back to normal by then. And once you're earning, then we can defer that cost to later. You know, letting you opt out of certain things like that. I'm just sort of saying, look, you know, we're fine, so we'll carry on going as normal, but okay, how about we pay these tax, we let them kind of pile up a little bit and spread them across 5 years because, you know, you guys can do that. So at the moment, giving you a loan, it's still giving you that independence to do something with your loan, because if you're getting a business loan and you don't need to use the business loan, nothing's stopping you from just spending on all that. So I guess they could kind of cut some of these costs a little bit, or at least give you a specific, almost like a grant as opposed to a loan, as long as it's spent towards business costs of aiding you within that side, you know, or to keep you in order. Because there's no point in sort of, for example, giving you $20,000 and saying, here you go, sort yourself out. Because if someone doesn't need that, they end up spending it on something they don't need, you know, or they save it or use it that way. But it's probably better for them to sort of say, here's, you know, $10,000 towards leasing. You can only spend it on the lease of your property, or you can only spend it towards, you know, utilities, whatever's really killing you right now, because you can't, you can't pay for it because the income isn't coming in. Just finding a way to just, you know, give you some grants for that, which you can pay over time, you know, rather than, you know, putting you into masses of debt is just kind of delaying the inevitable, if you like, you know, which gives you another problem later down the road. So I'd say that is a good way. And yeah, I guess, I don't know if this is even possible, but almost finding a way for you to opt out, because it's all good if the government was to sort of say, okay, listen, every office, you don't have to pay your leases right now and you can defer it, but then the landlords are in trouble, right? So you're kind of taking one problem from someone else and pushing it onto somebody else, you know? So try to find something where you can just opt out of it and just sort of say, right, I'm not going to pay for this for the foreseeable future, and just, you know, this service is now free. Even if it was something silly like internet or electricity or whatever it is, just make it temporarily, you know, free, and then just look at it later that you've got to contribute back to it. And maybe having some transparency around where the government is spending, you know, I mean, I'm going to try not to go off on a different topic here, but you know, some tax transparency spending could be great, because do you know, if you invest into a publicly listed company, the company always has to show you where your money is going and where they report it. But the governments always get away with not showing you where your tax money is going. So I always feel that there could be a policy where they're going to specifically report and show everybody every year exactly where your council tax is going, where, you know, your income tax is going. So, you know, it's actually going back into survival. Because again, there's a lot going on in Vancouver here in particular, where there are members in Parliament and in the council who they're quite protected in their roles, and they're not showing up to work because they're all working from home, and they're not even showing up to meetings and things like that because they're fully protected by the unions. So they're just kind of enjoying life while everyone else is suffering, but they've actually been put into power to help us in this crisis, but they're actually quite protected. So I guess some sort of transparency around there would be great. I mean, I'm not suggesting everyone who's doing these kind of things gets punished and so on. I just feel that if you're spending a certain amount of tax and you're handing over so much of your income tax, that you should at least see where it's going and then have some sort of debate and saying, do we really need to be, holding on to this amount of money for a rainy day, because now is this rainy day, So yeah, I think that's probably where I would go with some of these things. But, to try and stay a little bit more on topic, I think it's all going to be about, being able to relieve you of costs or help cover some costs. That's the way to sort of survive through this, because the only way you come out of a recession is to get people spending. And if people don't have money right now and they're not even allowed to spend them, you've got to find a way to cut the costs, So just finding some sort of balance, and whatever the rules are, they've got to be strictly enforced. Otherwise they don't work. If it just becomes a bit of a choice. So, something around that line, I would say. But, I wish I could just have some sort of break, if that makes sense, because I feel a lot of us, we're coming into work every day and we're working twice as hard as we were previously for maybe a quarter of the reward. And if we could find a way to actually just break that and just say, okay, look, we're going to take away a certain amount of costs, but you have to shut down for 2-3 months. It's easier to say, okay, at least I can afford to keep my team on, and I can afford to keep everybody in work. Because right now, the way they've got it is the easiest thing to do is literally let every one of your staff go and just, try and cut the costs and survive. But no one really wants to do that. Everyone wants to do what we can to keep going, because you're not just, I think as a business owner, you're not just responsible for yourself, you are responsible for your team as well, so you've got to, you've got to make sure you've got some sort of balance with that as well. But yeah, I wouldn't say I have a concrete plan, but I could definitely have a moan about a lot of things that they could do better. But sometimes they're easier said than done. But like I said, when you haven't got any transparency on what is being done and where the spending is coming and how much is available to spend, it's very difficult. You have to do it all on trust. And I wish we just had a bit more transparency, so we could, if we are going to live in a democratic society, we should be able to vote and say, okay, we have X amount of dollars, let's put it towards businesses, or let's put it towards schools, let's put it towards hospitals, because that's what we want to do,
I think you've raised a really interesting point there about transparency with how taxes are spent, particularly in light of stories that have come out of the UK over the last few months around government contracts being awarded to companies to supply PPE who were CEO'd or owned by people who are friends of Tory ministers. They've not gone through the usual processes of having to bid for the contracts, and it does make the public massively suspicious and sceptical that you're just there to line your own pockets and to line your mates' pockets. Whereas if there was transparency with where this money's going, how much, why that decision was taken, why that company was the best company to be selected to supply the services they're being chosen to supply, I think the public trust, COVID aside, the public trust in governments in the UK and around the world, it would improve, because at the moment it's, particularly with right-leaning parties, I have to say, yes, it happens with left-leaning parties as well, but particularly with right-leaning parties who are all about the money, it just feels like some of them are in there just to get what they can out of their position, and they're not there to serve the people who have elected them into the positions they're in. So I think you've touched upon some of this already, because we know that there's news of lots of viruses coming close to being released for use on a mass scale, which will help the virus to be managed once those vaccines are out there. What do you think the government should prioritise once the virus has been managed and countries can open up more fully? What for you should be the priorities of the government?
Yeah, I think, like I said before a little bit, you got to get people spending. You got to get people out of there and spending money to get the economy going, which, is, and one way to get people spending is you've got to get them keeping their jobs. So I touched on how Canada, we have this wage subsidiary. I think they should keep that for a couple of years, because it keeps businesses, it keeps people in work and it keeps businesses going, so if they keep I have this feeling once the virus is out and things are perceived as back to normal, you know, some of these costs are just going to come creeping back up. So it's still going to cause a bit of a recession per se. But if you keep people spending, which means keep them employed, so you keep the businesses, you know, with some subsidy, I think that'll be a good way to get us back out of this. On top of this, I think there's an opportunity to build, you know. I can't think of a particular example in the UK, but I know, for example, out here on the West Coast here in Los Angeles, they had the first day in nearly decades where you could see through the whole city because of the smog wasn't there, because there was so little traffic. And the reason they have this problem is because it's so busy, you can't build any more highways and so on because you can't afford to shut them down. But this is an opportunity for them to do that because traffic has decreased, population has sort of been moving out. It's an opportunity for them to rebuild, you know, maybe make things a little greener as well. It's an opportunity to digitize. You touched on the big corporations have got online shopping and things like that, so they can almost just shift policy and shift tactics and sort of come out of it, whereas smaller companies can't. So maybe you know, digitalization is a good opportunity now to get everyone in on that, to show that this might not be the first pandemic we go through in our lifetime. You know, there could be a few more coming up or repercussions, you know. So it's good to get people digitized so you can do certain things more indoors as opposed to out there. You know, I think there's a lot that can be done in terms of the economy. Again, it probably does. It probably does happen in the UK quite a lot, but there was a statistic that came out in Canada recently for Vancouver in particular, where between 60 and 70% of the whole wealth in Vancouver is actually hoarded in cash accounts in banks. So, you know, there's billions of billions just sat in bank accounts here that are not being spent or anything. People are just saving them. And there's nothing wrong with that as an individual. There's nothing wrong with, you know, I'm sure most people's goal in life is to have a certain degree of wealth and, you know, be, you know, financially secure. But if all that cash is sat in the account owned by a handful of individuals and the government hasn't even got access to it, you know, they could almost put a program in where, you know, you can invest into the government right now. I know they've done it in the past where you invest in government bonds and so on. They should reintroduce things like that, so then you can pull some of those billions out and have these wealthy people investing back into the government, and, you know, they'll get rewarded for it through percentages and so on, but at least the government then has money to use to help the rest of us, you know. I think that's a program that could be introduced, but like you said, typically what happens is it's in politics, it's lining the pockets of a small club, so like it's easier said than done. Yeah, you know, I think you know, those are a couple of things I think we could do, but you know what, yeah, you know, what's interesting is how everyone is dealing with it differently. I mean, you know, that in the United States there's a big COVID problem. It's probably one of the worst hit countries in the world with the way they're doing it, and you know, sales of guns are up. You know, like everyone is buying guns, everyone is preparing for even worse. You know, I know between the sort of 4 or 5 of us here, how we you probably watched so many of them shows about people building bunkers and you know, getting prepped for the world end apocalypse and things like that. And, you know, it's not too far off, you know, like, no, it's not the worst place to be now, in someone's bunker with 9 months worth of food supply, just waiting it out. You know, it's I don't think the situation is that quite dramatic, but, you know, you can see how people are preparing for these things because perhaps the government aren't helping you as much as you always trust them to do, or how much they could. So whilst it's not something probably personally I would do, stock up on guns and build a bunker, I can see why certain people do that now, whereas before it was maybe a bit of a joke and something to laugh at, and you can see the seriousness of it now, of how if you think you're not going to get no help, you have to kind of survive, you know. So I don't know, I mean, there's loads of things we could do, but I think from any, you know, recovery perspective, I think we've just got to get people back to work and spending, and most of the things will kind of work themselves out. There's obviously lots of issues in terms of we've got to mentally get people back to normal and maybe educate people in a certain way to prepare for certain things, and, you know, we're all in it together, and kind of educate that you have to stop having this kind of selfish attitude to get yourself ahead rather than survive as one. But, you know, these things don't always happen because not everyone is going to be the same, and not everyone's going to have the same ideas, you know. But yeah, you know, those are some of the ideas I guess I'd have. I don't know if your question was tailored towards, how we would distribute the vaccine or who would get it first and stuff, but that's not something I don't know. I wouldn't really know where to start on something like that. I mean, your guess is as good as mine. It would be kids and old people, I guess, or something like that. But I wouldn't really know where we'd start distributing it at all. But yeah, I think those are the two general things I would say that's going to get. You've got to think about it like it was in 2008, where you've just got to get the economy rolling again.
I think that's going to be the important thing, and that's been reported on massively because there was a lot of disagreement on, should we put the economy first, should we put people's lives first? It's difficult both ways, because a poor economy will affect people's lives massively, not just their livelihoods. It will affect people's lives and could lead to poverty and worse. So it's not an easy call, but I think the economy, once there's a bit of stability, once the vaccines are out there that are proven to work, then the economy, like you've pointed out, Randy, it has to be the number one priority, because otherwise it will just lead to bigger and worse things for a lot of people. Yeah.
Well, we've sacrificed the economy for survival on this occasion. That was the general feeling for everyone, shut down and that. But a couple of little stats here from Vancouver anyway. You have a 0.0002 chance of catching COVID if you walk around, and you have a 99.2% chance of survival if you're under 70. So I think those are pretty stats that make you feel a lot safer. And then if you think of taking away all our spending and all our ability to earn and survive, I'd say the stats are a lot stronger for you to come into problems if there's no economy. I think for years, people will walk past a homeless person and not think much of it, but there'll be a lot of people who are going to become homeless as a result of this. And maybe it's making everyone as a society really think about it, in the sense of that it is important to generally understand how the economy works and, be part of the economy if you want to survive, because I don't think that's something we can beat. You're almost, with those small chances in Vancouver, let's say, of getting COVID, but you're almost guaranteed of having a problem the way we are doing it. So I can see the argument for both sides, where people are just sort of saying, why don't you just leave it to the lottery? If you get it, and you move on with life, because at least life has to move on with, with your working and so on. And you're guaranteed to have a problem if you don't do it the other way. But, that's why I'm not in charge of these decisions and someone else is, but, but that's where we go with it, but a lot of people are very unhappy here because of the chances very low of you catching COVID. So they're very unhappy that we are on lockdown, but, perhaps if we weren't on lockdown, these numbers would be substantially more likely to get it. So, you've got to look at it in so many different ways, but yeah. I guess that's what we could leave it as and see if we can go. Personally, however it happens, personally, as soon as we're back to normal, the better, in terms of just, there is, you can just go for a walk and go for a beer and not worry about anything. It would just be great. And it's definitely been 6 to 9 months now of reflection on just how good things were, and how little I should have been complaining about things. But it is human nature to always have a bit of a whinge and a moan about something that's going on in your life. So that's never really going to go away. But I certainly can't wait for things to go back to normal and, just enjoy myself again, just the simple things in life as we go.
Yeah, the little things, the freedoms we took for granted beforehand, that I'm sure we will appreciate so much more now. Jez and Rich, anything to add or ask?
Nothing much from me. I think from what you mentioned, Raj, I mean, I hope with the stats and what you've mentioned there, it looks like, things may get back to normal sooner than what's happening over here, I can see. And I think that's going to almost be kind of like the norm for you guys. Hopefully some form of normal. I think we're still quite far from that over in the UK currently.
What's interesting is you've got to remember the UK is smaller than the province of BC, but you have more population than the whole of Canada. So,
Yeah,
you know,
right.
you can, you know, our population is so much smaller than yours even, and we're wider spread out, which means we don't really brush shoulders with each other as often as you guys do. We obviously don't have anything like the London Underground or anything like that. So there's not really, even when people do congregate, they're normally at events that's not on a daily basis. So we definitely, it's hard to compare for sure, to say like, oh, well, we should do this and you shouldn't do that. And, you know, we definitely haven't had it as bad as you guys for sure, you know, but, you know, like I said, no one's got it easy though. It doesn't matter where you are in the world. No one's had it easy. So it's not really a comparison thing. It's just, I think everyone just wants to go back to normal and stuff for sure.
Agree.
Yeah.
Rich, any further comments?
I think for me, it's just about the vaccine. I'm a bit cautious about it because obviously the scientists have done great work getting it developed, but in terms of it's not being tested adequately, I don't think. We don't know the long-term effects of it. There's obviously been reports that people have COVID, have been reinfected with COVID, and then also you've got that that story where it could be the vaccine could it produce, like, could there be, because obviously viruses mutate and evolve over time, then could this vaccine cause COVID to be to mutate into something that's more lethal, that when you catch it, there's a increased likelihood that you could die. But obviously I'm just speaking, that's just my anxiety coming towards it, and just having that thought at the back of my mind. And it's just, obviously everyone's got the anxieties, but I think that's something that I'm a bit cautious and a bit anxious about. But obviously getting back to normal, well, I think it's not going to it's going to be a new normal. I think it's not going to be lockdowns over and then that's it. I think it needs to be a gradual process, and I think as everybody's mentioned, I think the economy has to now it needs to, like, that recovery coming out of this recession is gonna have to be something that's gonna be made a priority. And as you've mentioned, Raj, it's about getting people to spend, but you've got to make sure people are in a position where they can spend. So you've got to, the support needs to be there. And I think you have to be, there's a new way of thinking that you've got to attack this problem. It can't be something conventional. And I think we're a long way off the final solution, but we've just got to it's still going to be a struggle because life is nothing but a struggle. But I think as a country, as a world, that will be able to handle it, whatever comes.
Thanks for your input, guys. So we know throughout the whole pandemic, people have taken to watching a lot more things on their TV screens through popular streaming services. So just wondering if I can get one recommendation of a show or a film or something you've been watching in the last few months to help pass the time, as we've all had so much time indoors, particularly over here in the UK. I might start with us UK folk first, Randhir, because your suggestions might be something slightly different being based in Canada. So you have access to some different stuff. Jez, one thing that you recommend that has floated your boat during spending more time at home over the last few months?
Well, I'm not going to mention the show that I watched. I finished, and I mentioned it to Rich. But there is another program which I think is really good. Me and my wife have started watching it. It's quite big over in the States as well. It's called Evil. Don't know if you've heard of it. So,
oh
yeah,
is it the guy from Luke Cage?
The guy from Luke Cage, yeah. So he's the Catholic priest, and there's a lady who's like a psychologist. So they're both working together, and she's there's also another chap as well who's also not really a believer in things. He kind of says, well, this isn't real. This isn't real. This is my way or narrative of how this has been staged. And he kind of investigates a little bit more further to say, oh, this is a camera that's been set up, or the girl has this type of previous illness or abuse, for example, that's happened that's caused her to be like this. So it talks around like exorcisms and kind of like supernatural things that go on, and it's kind of proving is it real or not, and it kind of opens up more of a story around demonic like parodies that are going on as well, and looks at kind of like the bigger picture to that. So it's actually quite good. It's almost a cross between X-Files and how would I put it? Like a bit like X-Files, but also a mixture of supernatural. There we go. Bit of a mixture of both, really. So yeah, it's good. I like it. I like it. Me and Rach have been watching it quite a bit every week. And that's my current series and recommendation, guys.
Fabulous. Thank you, Rich, for your input. Sorry, Jez. How can I get you two mixed up? Rich, because I was coming to you next, that's why. Rich, yes. Your recommendation. I think I can guess, maybe.
No, it's not.
The surprises. Are you going to surprise us?
It was going to be the boys. But me and Katie, we watched this. I don't know if it's like a mini series of collection of stories, but oh man, it's called Small Axes. 2 episodes came out, but I think it's like different stories. So the episode 1 was about a cafe, black-owned cafe, and it was open around about the 70s, and basically the police, it was in London, just harassed the restaurant owners, and it's the issues coming out of that. Had Black Panthers got involved, and don't want to spoil the story, but it was a really good story. And the second episode I found really interesting, because it might have given me insight to what my mum, like how my mum lived during the 80s. It was basically, I don't know if you know, in terms of like the house parties they used to have in London, particularly in London, where they would have a sound system. So they'll just bring this big off speaker, and you got the bass just ringing around the house, and everyone just comes into the party, and it's just essentially a party. It's just, the episode's just a party, but it's like the fighting, the soundtrack's just so nice, man. Just, oh yeah.
Lovers Rock.
Yeah, Lovers Rock. Yeah, I think that's what the episode was called. I think it was called The Lover's Story, but it was Lovers Rock. Yeah. I did ask Kate to dance, during it, because it was the soundtrack's that good. And then I don't want to spoil it, but yeah, I think that's an ongoing series. But yeah, but I started getting into that. Yeah.
It's funny you mentioned the 80s there. Like, I've been listening to loads of new wave 80s music in the last few weeks. Just like that kind of nostalgic kind of feeling again. You're kind of nostalgic, wishing, I wish I could just go to the pub and just go back to normal and be listening to all this old music and stuff as well.
Any sense of normality. Rich, do the episodes follow on from each other, or are the standalone episodes?
No, I think they're standalone. It's only 2 that have come out. It's on the BBC. Yeah, it's on the BBC, but I don't know enough about. I don't know if they interconnect. But I think But there was some famous stars in it. There was what's his name? You know the guy from Top Boy?
Yes.
Guy from Top Boy.
Yeah.
No, is it Top Boy? No, I'm getting confused. I think there was a lady. Well, I can't think of the names now, but yeah, it's because obviously I haven't done the research properly to the actors and stuff, because we literally only watched it a couple of hours ago, because I was going to talk about The Boys, but you know, that's another episode. That's how I tried to get in 2 recommendations, but you know, I'm going to keep quiet now.
Yeah, it's more like the directed by Steve McQueen out there, who directed 12 Years a Slave.
Yeah.
So I've heard rave reviews about that. So it is on mine and Mrs. Selkirk's list.
I've added it to my list as well. Yeah, I've got it on mine. Yeah,
of what to watch. Randhir, what is top of the pops TV viewing wise over in Canada?
I thought we were going to hear yours first, but I don't mind going. I'm glad we're ending on something a lot more positive. I think the most positive thing I've seen in the last 9 months is football is still around. I still get to watch football, which is great. Do you know, like August this year, August of this year was actually my 10th year anniversary since I left the UK. So like it's gone, it's been quite a while, as you guys know now, you know. So 2010 I left, and my wife's from the Gulf countries. She's from Dubai, so she hasn't seen a lot of British TV. So I've actually subscribed to the British channels on Amazon. Now, they're not all the latest stuff. There's quite a lot of stuff in there from like the 90s and stuff that I probably didn't even watch when I lived at home, like as a teenager. But it's interesting because, you know, for the first time, she's seeing a lot of this stuff, because I think we're a little bit Netflixed and stuff out now. You know, there's only so many films you can watch. I don't think it doesn't want to be part of our routine. So I found this, but like, you know, I've been watching some classics, man, like Red Dwarf, like been going through that. Yes. You guys remember a show called The Thin Blue Line, as Rowan Atkinson in it? It's like I swear I never watched this show when it came on the TV. I remember it coming on like every Friday or whatever. And like, you know, Parv is loving stuff like this. She's just sometimes we have to pause it and like go through the jokes in detail, what it means, because if you don't understand some of the British humor, you wouldn't understand the slang, and it would make no sense. So I do have to pause and go through it. It's funny because I'll pause and I'll explain it, and then she'll crack up in between the jokes because she'll get it. Do you know what I mean? And like that's been quite a lot of fun going through some of them. I'm trying to think of something else that I've been enjoying recently, but those are 2 that I'm definitely watching. There's so much random stuff on there. There's like episodes of Emmerdale from when it first started and stuff that. And there's literally like EastEnders from the 70s, like 80s and stuff. And like, I can only watch 5 minutes of it and go, what am I doing here? And I'll just like move on to something else, you know? But like some of the shows that I used to love, I didn't realize how quickly they get dated as well. You know, like I used to love the Fast Show when it came out. And when you watch it now, it's like, is this like the same joke every week or something? Because it just kind of, everything just looks so recycled. I didn't enjoy it as much as I used to when I was a kid or something. I don't know, but you know, maybe it's just dated and stuff. But it's nice to go through some of these old ones, and you do forget how much you enjoy them, you know. But like, and also it's brand new for the wife, so like it's funny, you know. But I can't think of anything latest. I have watched The Boys, so I'm with Rich in that, so I'll keep you updated with that. The other latest thing is probably that Mandalorian has been coming out, which is quite interesting on Disney.
Yeah, that's a good thing.
Yeah, I've been watching it as well, Raj.
No spoilers. No,
but do you know, I'm not actually like a huge Star Wars fan or anything like that, and Parv hasn't even seen any of the Star Wars really, I don't think. But you don't really have to know too much about what's going on. It's quite independent from it, and it's just like a cool little show, you know.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. Right, mine's a bit of a throwback as well, not as much of a throwback as most of your examples, Randhir, but mine is something that I wanted to watch at the time it came out on Channel 4 in 2002. It's based on a Zadie Smith novel, White Teeth, it's called. So I discovered that a few weeks ago and I watched it. It's 4 episodes. It's on Netflix. The first episode is set in 1970s England, and it works up through. It goes into the 80s and then to the 90s. It stars Naomi Harris, Om Puri, Archie Panjabi, and Phil Davis. And it's about how cultures meet and families form and how that progresses through the years. Comedy drama, I think I'd describe it as. It's quite good viewing. I'd quite like to read the book, actually. I usually like to read the books of things first before watching the film or the TV version, because I kind of know what's coming in the book otherwise, even though they do change some of it. But yeah, I'd recommend that. It's 4 episodes, so it's not it's not going to be too onerous to watch it. So if you have a bit of time, watch White Teeth. It is on Netflix.
Cool.
Right, that brings us to the end of episode 4 of season 2. Thank you so much, Randhir, for joining us.
No problem. Anytime. Enjoyed it.
It's been good catching up with you. Thank you also to the usual crew, Rich and Jez. And we shall sign off for this show. Please check out all our social media, Twitter, Facebook, and of course Instagram, and our brand new video channel on YouTube. Give it a whirl. You'll get to see all our ugly mugs in all their glory. Until next time, listeners.